Tonight, President Obama accepts the Nobel Peace Prize while acknowledging the controversy and the irony.
I am the Commander-in-Chief of the military of a nation in the midst of two wars.
I'm Katie Couric. Also tonight, the country catches cold. In a quarter of the states, temperatures fell below zero. It was so cold, a waterfall didn't. The government spends your tax dollars to help the homeless in a town that doesn't have any. We'll follow the money. And dog's best friend in tonight's American Spirit.
This is the CBS Evening News with Katie Couric.
Good evening, everyone. It wasn't what we've come to expect at the annual ceremony presenting the Nobel Peace Prize. The winner spending much of his acceptance speech talking about war and defending it as necessary at times. But the recipient, President Obama, is fighting two wars. And as Chip Reid reports from Oslo, he's not apologizing.
In an elaborate ceremony before an adoring audience, the president said he sees no conflict in accepting the Nobel Peace Prize just days after ordering 30,000 troops to war.
Some will kill, and some will be killed. And so I come here with an acute sense of the costs of armed conflict.
He said he admires the nonviolence preached by previous recipients, including Dr. Martin Luther King, who received the Peace Prize 45 years ago today. But citing al-Qaeda, the president said evil does exist in the world and said he has a duty to protect and defend the nation.
To say that force may sometimes be necessary is not a call to cynicism, it is a recognition of history. So yes, the instruments of war do have a role to play in preserving the peace.
And so, too, he said, does America.
The United States of America has helped underwrite global security for more than 6 decades with the blood of our citizens and the strength of our arms.
Some frequent critics, including Republican Newt Gingrich, commended the president for arguing that war is sometimes the best path to peace.
I think having a liberal president who goes to Oslo on behalf of a peace prize and reminds the committee that they would not be free, they wouldn't be able to have a peace prize without having force. I thought in some ways it's a very historic speech.
But Gingrich and others questioned why a president in office less than a year is now on a wall with the likes of Mother Teresa and Teddy Roosevelt, why a man who admits he has done little,
my accomplishments are slight,
should be celebrated with a lavish dinner and cheered by thousands at a torchlight parade. The president said other prize winners are far more deserving, but he did not go as far as he did in October, when he said he didn't deserve the prize and would accept it only as a call to action. 66% of Americans believe the president does not deserve the prize. Jody Williams agrees. She won it 12 years ago for her work against landmines.
I have no problem with the president getting a peace prize for contributing to peace. With just a vision, what really matters is what you do, not what you say.
And it's not all praise here in Oslo either. Some are calling the president rude for staying only one day and for skipping some traditional events, including a concert for Save the Children and lunch with the king. Katie?
Chip Reid in Oslo. Chip, thanks very much. Here at home, the president's been criticized by some for announcing he'll begin withdrawing U.S. forces from Afghanistan in July of 2011. Steve Kroft asked him about that in an exclusive interview for 60 Minutes.
I mean, there are people that say, why set a deadline? I mean, Senator McCain most prominently.
Right, and the answer is that in the absence of a deadline, the message we are sending to the Afghans is it's business as usual. This is an open-ended commitment. And very frankly, there are, I think, elements in Afghanistan who would be perfectly satisfied to make Afghanistan a permanent protectorate of the United States, in which they carry no burden, in which we're paying for a military in Afghanistan that preserves their security and their prerogatives. That's not what the American people signed off for when they went into Afghanistan in 2001. They signed up to go after al-Qaeda.
And you can see more of Steve's exclusive interview with the president this Sunday on 60 Minutes. Now to the weather. That monster storm blamed for at least 17 deaths has now given way to bitter cold. Across the Midwest, temperatures plunged overnight, and with the wind chill, some places felt like it was well below zero, minus 27 in Iowa. Dean Reynolds is in Chicago, where the mercury today didn't get above 14. And Dean, 2/3 of the country is being affected by this cold snap.
Katie, if it's not blowing or snowing where you are tonight, the chances are the temperature is still painfully cold.
Lake effect snow, whipped by howling winds, created whiteout conditions along the eastern shores of the Great Lakes, as well as neighboring areas of the Midwest and Northeast today. A parting shot to a miserable week.
Freezing. It's ridiculously cold.
The ice, wind, and snow conspired to wreak havoc on the roads and rails. A double-decker bus overturned on the New York State Thruway in Lancaster. A big rig slid off I-94 at Kalamazoo, Michigan. As the main weather system raced east toward the Maine coast, its tail end churned up trouble far to the south and west. There were 100-mile-an-hour winds in both New Mexico and North Carolina, where a toppled pine tree smashed a truck and killed the driver.
Freak of nature, act of God is no other way to really explain it.
Wind chills in Montana hit minus 36, in Denver minus 17. The actual temperature in the Nebraska Panhandle this morning, 22 below. And in northern Arizona, under a 3-foot snowfall, rescuers are searching for at least a dozen hunters feared stranded since Monday.
The roads are just impassable, period. We can't even get in there with our four-wheel drive vehicles. We're having to use the snowcats.
Here in Chicago, it's expected to warm up soon, but out west, another potentially big snowstorm is coming, and it could hit this weekend. Katie?
Dean Reynolds. Dean, thanks very much. Meanwhile, a storm of protests may be coming on Wall Street. The government is going after some high-paid executives again. Business correspondent Anthony Mason is here with that story. And Anthony, folks angry at Wall Street have apparently found a kindred spirit.
Yes, they have, Katie. CBS News has learned that the president's pay czar, Ken Feinberg, will be slapping a new set of pay restrictions on top executives tomorrow to rein in compensation at companies rescued by the government bailout.
The pay czar is expected to put a $500,000 limit on cash compensation to the second tier of executives at 6 companies. The top executives have already agreed to restrictions that were in part designed to discourage the kind of reckless risk-taking that led to the financial crisis.
I think it's completely fair that they should try and figure out a way to reduce the risk in the system so that we don't go through the agony of the past 12 months.
But Feinberg's new pay restrictions will affect only 225 executives at 3 major financial firms. The British government has been far tougher, announcing this week a 50% tax on banker bonuses above $40,000.
If they insist on paying substantial rewards, I'm determined to claw money back for the taxpayer.
Bonuses at U.S. banks are expected to soar by 40% this year. Bowing to a storm of criticism, Goldman Sachs, which has set aside more than $16 billion for bonus pay, said today it will not pay cash bonuses to its top 30 executives. Instead, it will award them stock that can't be sold for 5 years.
Goldman is working very hard to change the negative image of that company by, if you will, jumping ahead of what the government might demand from them.
The president has called a summit of CEOs from the leading financial companies for next Monday at the White House. At the top of the agenda, reforming financial regulations. Katie?
Anthony Mason. Anthony, thank you. Some say the government needs to clamp down on its own spending. The House today passed a $447 billion spending bill that includes 5,000 earmarks, pet projects worth nearly $4 billion. Taxpayer watchdogs say it's been a banner year for wasteful spending. Cheryl Atkinson follows the money.
$500,000 in stimulus funds came to the rescue in financially strapped Pawtucket, Rhode Island. But it didn't help with their deficit, layoffs, or unpaid school bills. Instead, the town built this, a brand new skate park.
As 2009 draws to a close, the taxpayers' collective finger could be pointed at a lot of questionable government spending. But today, fiscal conservatives in Congress identified what they call the worst projects of the 111th Congress.
A water taxi service to a dilapidated beach town in Connecticut, an urban art trail in Rochester, New York, new bike racks in Georgetown, one of the capital's most affluent areas. And your tax dollars were spent to fight homelessness in Union, New York, where nobody asked for the money and they don't have a homeless problem. It's not that the administration hasn't tried to root out questionable expenses.
So guys, no swimming pools, no tennis courts, no golf courses.
But it's hard for anyone to oversee numbers this big. $217 billion in stimulus funds and billions in congressional earmarks. Congress specifically prohibited spending stimulus funds on casinos, but in Detroit, they got around that. They're building decorative sidewalks, streetscapes, and bike racks on the 4 roads that happen to surround a casino. With the nation $12 trillion in debt, taxpayers may find it more difficult to watch their money spent on projects that don't seem urgent.
When you're in a hole this deep, you certainly don't dig deeper.
The fate of the economy may be uncertain, but as Congress rolls out the newest spending bill, fat with earmarks, taxpayers can count on one thing in 2010, more spending. Cheryl Atkinson, CBS News, Washington.
In other news, it took 6 years and a Supreme Court ruling, but today a group of white firefighters in New Haven, Connecticut was finally promoted. The city had thrown out the promotion exam because few minorities passed it. But this year, the Supreme Court said that violated the civil rights of the white firefighters. And today, 14 who sued became lieutenants and captains, along with 10 others who were not part of the suit, including 4 minorities. And coming up next here on the CBS Evening News, the latest numbers on the H1N1 flu.
Good job.
The H1N1 flu began hitting Americans last spring, and now we're getting a clearer picture of the impact. The CDC estimated today that nearly 50 million of us have come down with the flu. Nearly 10,000 have died, including 1,100 children. Dr. John LaPook has more.
Today, the CDC reported just how fast and hard the latest wave of H1N1 has hit. As of mid-November, about 1 in 6 Americans had gotten sick from the virus. Previously, the CDC estimated that about 22 million people came down with it from April to mid-October. In the space of 4 weeks, that number jumped to 47 million, the vast majority under age 65.
Many times more children and younger adults, unfortunately, had been hospitalized or killed by H1N1 influenza than occurs during a usual flu season.
In a typical flu season, about 20,000 children are hospitalized. Already in the first 7 months of the H1N1 outbreak, 71,000 have been hospitalized. Public health officials say while this flu is more severe for younger patients, overall it's no more lethal than the regular seasonal flu.
We are now able to say that it's not mild, it's still causing destruction and hospitalizations and deaths, but it is on the milder end of what we thought it might be.
Since November, new infections seem to be receding, but the CDC is urging people not to forget about immunization. Last month at the Dallas County Health Department, 3,000 people poured in daily for vaccine. That's now down to a trickle. Dr. John Carlo is worried the virus isn't done yet.
We haven't even hit our typical flu season yet, so we really got to be concerned what the rest of the winter is going to be like.
The H1N1 vaccine crunch seems to be easing, as 85 million doses are now available. Katie?
Which is good news. So does that mean anyone can get the H1N1 vaccine now?
Yes, if you happen to live in a part of the country where there's enough vaccine. That's not true in Dallas. This morning I got an email from the Department of Health in New York City saying there's plenty available. But the CDC is warning us, look, don't get complacent because there happens to be a relative lull in new cases. Go ahead and get vaccinated because you don't know if and when the next wave will come.
All right, I still need to do that. Dr. John LaPook. John, thanks very much. And for more, you can go to our partner in health coverage, WebMD.com, and simply search H1N1. Finally tonight, bet you didn't know this, but some animals have guardian angels. You can see them, they really do have wings, and they can save an animal's life. Richard Schlesinger shows us in tonight's American Spirit.
Patches is 5 months old, part Basset Hound, part who knows what. And a few weekends ago, she barely escaped being euthanized in a Georgia animal shelter.
She probably would not have made it through the end of the afternoon on Monday.
Patches was rescued and will be taken on a flight for her life by John Warenberg, a member of a group of animal-loving aviators called Pilots and Paws. It's a sort of overground railroad for pets.
Good girl, Bella.
It's a sad fact, but geography often can make the difference between life and death for dogs and cats.
Cleared for takeoff, 5 right, 2 Juliet Bravo.
More than 1,000 pilots working with rescue groups volunteer to fly pets mostly from the southeast, where one survey found 68% of animals in shelters are euthanized.
Juliet Bravo, runway 2 left.
To the north, where there are more no-kill shelters and pets stand a far better chance of adoption.
She's a pretty baby.
Most of the animals flown to safety have been dogs, but not all of them. Some have been cats. One pilot in Florida flew a pot-bellied pig. They've also taken reptiles and at least 4 bunnies.
There you go, baby.
Nobody has counted how many pets have been saved in this airlift, but this one pilot,
runway 9er, cleared for takeoff.
Steve Hall, has ferried more than 300 dogs north to Long Island, including some who became more than just passengers.
You know, by the time I picked him up and brought him over to the plane, you know, he was, I didn't want to see him go.
So Brutus became one of the newest members of Steve Hall's family. And Brutus isn't the only passenger who Steve Hall hijacked. There was also something about Amy, who's now the Hall's 4th dog.
CBM is turning final, runway 15.
This is one ad hoc airline where every trip has a happy ending. All the dogs on Hall's flight had homes waiting for them.
Their divas in training.
When he landed.
It's something you do that feels good when it happens, and there's enough garbage going on that I don't feel great about. So this is excellent.
And Patches, who was days away from death, is on her way to a new life in Illinois, where she's loved and looked after, and above all, safe. Richard Schlesinger, CBS News, Shirley, New York.
And if you know someone who has the American spirit, please go to our website at cbsnews.com and let us know. And that is the CBS Evening News for tonight. I'm Katie Couric. Thanks for watching. I'll see you tomorrow. Good night.